reaction in your body from the subconscious softening of your eyebrows to the positioning of your toes, and everything between. In my seminars, I first have people introduce themselves to another participant before they've learned the hello old friend technique. The group chats as though at a pleasant, semi-formal gathering. Later, I ask them to introduce themselves to another stranger, imagining they are old friends. The difference is extraordinary. When they're using hello old friend, the room comes alive. The atmosphere is charged with good feeling. The air sparkles with happier, high-energy people. They are standing closer, laughing more sincerely, and reaching out to one another. I feel like I'm attending a terrific bash that's been going on for hours. Not a word need be spoken. The hello old friend technique even supersedes language. Whenever you're traveling in countries where you don't speak the native tongue, be sure to use it. If you find yourself with a group of people who are all speaking a language unknown to you, just imagine them to be a group of your old friends. Everything is fine except they momentarily forgot how to speak English. In spite of the fact you won't understand a word, your whole body still responds with congeniality and acceptance. I've used the hello old friend technique while traveling in Europe. Sometimes my English-speaking friends who live there tell me their European colleagues say I am the friendliest American they've ever met. Yet we'd never spoken a word between us. A self-fulfilling prophecy. An added benefit to the hello old friend technique is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you act as though you like someone, you start to really like them. An Adelphi University study called, appropriately, Believing Another Likes or Dislikes You, Behaviors Making the Beliefs Come True, proved it. Researchers told volunteers to treat unsuspecting subjects as though they like them. When surveyed later, the results showed the volunteers wound up genuinely liking the subjects. The unsuspecting subjects were also surveyed. These respondents expressed much higher respect and affection for the volunteers who pretended they liked them. What it boils down to is love begets love, like begets like, respect begets respect. Use the hello old friend technique, and you will soon have many new old friends who wind up genuinely liking you. You now have all the basics to come across to everyone you meet as a somebody, a friendly somebody. But your job isn't over yet. In addition to being liked, you want to appear credible, intelligent, and sure of yourself. Each of the next 3 techniques accomplishes one of those goals. 7. How to come across as 100% credible to everyone. My friend Helen is a highly respected headhunter. She makes terrific hires for her clients, and I once asked her the secret of her success. Helen replied, "Probably because I can almost always tell when an applicant is lying." "How can you tell?" She said, "Well, just last week I was interviewing a young woman for a position as marketing director for a small firm. Throughout the interview, the applicant had been sitting with her left leg crossed over her right. Her hands were comfortably resting in her lap, and she was looking directly at me. I asked her salary. Without swerving her eyes from mine, she told me. I asked if she enjoyed her work. Still looking directly at me, she said yes. Then I asked her why she left her previous job. At that point, her eyes fleetingly darted away before regaining eye contact with me. Helen continued. Then, while answering my question, she shifted in her seat and crossed her right leg over her left. At one point, she put her hands up to her mouth. Helen said, "That's all I needed." With her words, she was telling me she felt her growth opportunities were limited at her previous firm. But her body told me she was not being entirely forthright. Helen went on to explain the young woman's fidgeting alone wouldn't prove she was lying. Nevertheless, it was enough, she said, that she wanted to pursue the subject further. So I tested it, Helen explained. I changed the subject and went back to more neutral territory. I asked her about her goals for the future. Again, the girl stopped fidgeting. She folded her hands in her lap as she told me how she'd always wanted to work in a small company in order to have hands-on experience with more than one project. Then I repeated my earlier question. I asked again if it was only the lack of growth opportunity that made her leave her previous position. Sure enough, once again, the woman shifted in her seat and momentarily broke eye contact. As she continued talking about her last job, she started rubbing her forearm. Helen continued to probe until she finally uncovered the truth. The applicant had been fired because of a nasty disagreement with the marketing director for whom she worked. Human resources professionals who interview applicants and police officers who interrogate suspected criminals are trained to detect lies. They know specifically what signals to look for. The rest of us, although not knowledgeable about specific clues to deceit, have a sixth sense when someone is not telling us the truth. Just recently, a colleague of mine was considering hiring an in-house booking agent. After interviewing one fellow, she said to me, "I don't know. I don't really think he has the success he claims." "You think he's lying to you?" I asked. "Absolutely. And the funny thing is, I can't tell why. He looked right at me. He answered all my questions directly. There was just something that didn't seem right." Employers often feel this way. They have a gut feeling about someone, but they can't put their finger on it. Because of that, many large companies turn to the polygraph, or lie detector, a mechanical apparatus designed to detect if someone is lying. Banks, drugstores, and grocery stores rely heavily on it for pre-employment screening. The FBI, Justice Department, and most police departments have used the polygraph on suspects. Interestingly, the polygraph is not a lie detector at all. All the machine can do is detect fluctuations in our autonomic nervous system, changes in breathing patterns, sweating, flushing, heart rate, blood pressure, and other signs of emotional arousal. So is it accurate? Well, yes, often it is. Why? Because when the average person tells a lie, he or she is emotionally aroused and bodily changes do take place. When that happens, the individual might fidget. Experienced or trained liars, however, can fool the polygraph. Beware of the appearance of lying, even when you're telling the truth. Problems arise for us when we are not lying but are feeling emotional or intimidated by the person with whom we are talking. A young man telling an attractive woman about his business success might shift his weight. A woman talking about her company's track record to an important client could rub her neck. More problems arise out of the atmosphere. A businessman who doesn't feel nervous at all could loosen his collar because the room is hot. A politician giving a speech outdoors could blink excessively because the air is dusty. Even though erroneous, these fidgety movements give the listeners the sense something just isn't right, or a gut feeling that the speaker is lying. Professional communicators, alert to this hazard, consciously squelch any signs anyone could mistake for shiftiness. They fix a constant gaze on the listener. They never put their hands on their faces. They don't massage their arm when it tingles or rub their nose when it itches. They don't loosen their collar when it's hot or blink because it's sandy. They don't wipe away tiny perspiration beads in public or shield their eyes from the sun. They suffer because they know fidgeting undermines credibility. Consider the infamous September 25, 1960 televised presidential debate between Richard Milhous Nixon and John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Political pundits speculate Nixon's lack of makeup, his fidgeting, and mopping his brow on camera lost him the election. If you want to come across as an entirely credible somebody, try to squelch all extraneous movement when your communication counts. I call the technique limit the fidget. Technique number 7. Limit the fidget. Whenever your conversation really counts, let your nose itch, your ear tingle, or your foot prickle. Do not fidget, twitch, wiggle, squirm, or scratch. And above all, keep your paws away from your puss. Hand motions near your face, and all fidgeting can give your listener the gut feeling you're fibbing. Now let's tackle intelligence. What, you ask? Can people come across as more intelligent than they really are? Well, did you ever hear of Hans, the counting horse? Hans was considered the most intelligent horse in history, and he used the technique I'm about to suggest. 8. How to read people like you have ESP. Hans, a very clever horse, inspires this next technique. Hans was owned by Herr von Osten, a Berliner, who had trained Hans to do simple arithmetic by tapping his right front hoof. So prodigious was Hans's ability that the horse's fame quickly spread throughout Europe in the early 1900s. He became known as Clever Hans, the counting horse. Herr von Osten taught Hans to do more than just add. Soon the horse could subtract and divide. In time, Clever Hans even mastered the multiplication tables. The horse became quite a phenomenon. Without his owner uttering a single word, Hans could count out the size of his audience, tap the number wearing glasses, or respond to any counting question they asked him. Finally, Hans achieved the ultimate ability that separates man from animal: language. Hans learned the alphabet. By tapping out hoofbeats for each letter, he answered any question about anything humans had read in a newspaper or heard on the radio. He could even answer common questions about history, geography, and human biology. Hans made headlines and was the main topic of discussion at dinner parties throughout Europe. The human horse quickly attracted the attention of scientists, psychology professors, veterinarians, even cavalry officers. Naturally, they were skeptical, so they established an official commission to decide whether the horse was a case of clever trickery or equine genius. Whatever their suspicions, it was obvious to all Hans was a very smart horse. Compared to other horses, Hans was a somebody. Cut to today. Why is it when you talk with certain individuals, you just know they are smarter than other people, that they are a somebody? Often they're not discussing highfalutin subjects or using $2 words. Nevertheless, everybody knows. People say, "She's smart as a whip. He doesn't miss a trick. She picks up on everything. He's got the right stuff. She's got horse sense." Which brings us back to Hans. The day of the big test arrived. Everyone was convinced it must be a trick orchestrated by Herr von Osten, Hans's owner. It was standing room only in the auditorium filled with scientists, reporters, clairvoyants, psychics, and horse lovers who eagerly awaited the answer. The canny commission members were confident this was the day they would expose Hans as chicanery, because they too had a trick up their sleeves. They were going to bar von Osten from the hall and put his horse to the test all alone. When the crowd was assembled, they told von Osten he must leave the auditorium. The surprised owner departed, and Hans was stranded in an auditorium with a suspicious and anxious audience. The confident commission leader asked Hans the first mathematical question. He tapped out the right answer. A second. He got it right. Then a third. Then the language questions followed. He got them all right. The commission was befuddled. The critics were silenced. However, the public wasn't. With a great outcry, they insisted on a new commission. The world waited while, once again, the authorities gathered scientists, professors, veterinarians, cavalry officers, and reporters from around the world. Only after this second commission put Hans to the test did the truth about the clever horse come out. Commission number 2 started the enquiry perfunctorily with a simple addition problem. This time, however, instead of asking the question out loud for all to hear, one researcher whispered a number in Hans's ear, and a second researcher whispered another. Everyone expected Hans to quickly tap out the sum. But Hans remained dumb. Aha! The researchers revealed the truth to the waiting world. Can you guess what that was? Here's a hint. When the audience or researcher knew the answer, Hans did too. Now can you guess? People gave off very subtle body language signals the moment Hans's hoof gave the right number of taps. When Hans started tapping the answer to a question, the audience would show subtle signs of tension. Then, when Hans reached the right number, they responded by an expulsion of breath or a slight relaxation of muscles. Van Osten had trained Hans to stop tapping at that point and therefore appear to give the right answer. Hans was using the technique I call Hans's horse sense. He watched his audience's reactions very carefully and planned his responses accordingly. If a horse can do it, so can you. Have you ever been watching TV when the phone rings? Someone asks you to hit the mute button on the television so they can talk. Because there's no sound now, you watch the TV action more carefully. You see performers smiling, scowling, smirking, squinting, and scores of other expressions. You don't miss a bit of the story because just from their expressions you can tell what they're thinking. Hans's horse sense is just that. Watching people, seeing how they're reacting, and then making your moves accordingly. Even while you're talking, keep your eyes on your listeners and watch how they're responding to what you're saying. Don't miss a trick. Are they smiling? Are they nodding? Are their palms up? They like what they're hearing. Are they frowning? Are they looking away? Are their knuckles clenched? Maybe they don't. Are they rubbing their necks? Are they stepping back? Are their feet pointing toward the door? Maybe they want to get away. You don't need a complete course in body language here. Already your life's experience has given you a good grounding in that. Most people know if their conversation partners step back or look away, they're not interested in what you're saying. When they think you're a pain in the neck, they rub theirs. When they feel superior to you, they steeple their hands. We'll explore more body language specifics in technique number 77, eyeball selling. For the moment, all you need to do is tune to the silent channel being broadcast by the speaker. Technique number 8, Hans's horse sense. Make it a habit to get on a dual track while talking. Express yourself, but keep a keen eye on how your listener is reacting to what you're saying. Then plan your moves accordingly. If a horse can do it, so can a human. People will say you pick up on everything. You never miss a trick. You've got horse sense. You now have 8 techniques to help you come across as a confident, credible, and charismatic person who makes everyone he or she comes in contact with feel like a million. Let's explore one last technique in this section to put it all together and make sure you don't miss a beat. 9. How to make sure you don't miss a single beat. You've seen professional skiing on television? The athlete at the top of the piste, every muscle primed and poised, waiting for the gun to propel him to ultimate victory. Look deeply into his eyes and you'll see he is having an out-of-body experience. In his mind's eye, the skier is swooshing down the slope, zapping back and forth between the poles, and sliding across the finish line in faster time than the world thought possible. The athlete is visualizing. All athletes do it. Divers, runners, jumpers, javelin throwers, lugers, swimmers, skaters, acrobats. They visualize their magic before performing it. They see their own bodies bending, twisting, flipping, or flying through the air. They hear the sound of the wind, the splash in the water, the whir of the javelin, the thud of its landing. They smell the grass, the cement, the pool, the dust. Before they move a muscle, professional athletes watch the whole movie, which of course ends in their own victory. Sports psychologists tell us visualization is not just for top-level competitive athletes. Studies show mental rehearsal helps weekend athletes sharpen their golf, their tennis, their running, whatever their favorite activity. Experts agree if you see the pictures, hear the sounds, and feel the movements of your body and your mind before you do the activity, the effect is powerful. 26 miles on my mattress. Psychological mumbo-jumbo? Absolutely not. My friend Richard runs marathons. Once, several years ago, a scant 3 weeks before the big New York marathon, an out-of-control car crashed into Richard's and he was taken to the hospital. He was not badly injured. Nevertheless, his friends felt sorry for him because being laid up 2 weeks in bed would naturally knock him out of the big event. What a surprise when, on that crisp November marathon morning in Central Park, Richard showed up in his little shorts and big running shoes. "Richard, are you crazy? You're in no shape to run. You've been in bed these past few weeks," we all cried out. "My body may have been in bed," he replied, "but I've been running." "What?" we asked in unison. "Yep, every day. 26 miles, 385 yards, right there on my mattress." Richard explained that in his imagination he saw himself traversing every step of the course. He saw the sights, heard the sounds, and felt the twitching movements in his muscles. He visualized himself racing in the marathon. Richard didn't do as well as he had the year before, but the miracle is he finished the marathon without injury, without excessive fatigue, thanks to his visualization. It works in just about any endeavor you apply it to, including being a terrific communicator. Visualization works best when you feel totally relaxed. Only when you have a calm state of mind can you get clear, vivid images. Do your visualization in the quiet of your home or car before leaving for the party, the convention, or the big deal meeting. See it all in your mind's eye ahead of time. Technique number 9. Watch the scene before you make the scene. Rehearse being the super somebody you want to be ahead of time. See yourself walking around with hang-by-your-teeth posture, shaking hands, smiling the flooding smile, and making sticky eyes. Hear yourself chatting comfortably with everyone. Feel the pleasure of knowing you are in peak form and everyone is gravitating toward you. Visualize yourself a super somebody. Then it all happens automatically. You now have the skills necessary to get you started on the right foot with any new person in your life. Think of yourself in these first moments like a rocket taking off. When the folks at Cape Kennedy aim a spacecraft for the moon, a mistake in the millionth of a degree at the beginning, when the craft is still on the ground, means missing the moon by thousands of miles. Likewise, a tiny body language blooper at the outset of a relationship may mean you will never make a hit with that person. But with the flooding smile, sticky eyes, epoxy eyes, hang by your teeth, the big baby pivot, hello old friend, limit the fidget, Hans's horse sense, and watch the scene before you make the scene, you'll be right on course to get whatever you eventually want from anybody, be it business, friendship, or love. We now move from the silent world to the spoken word. Part 2. How to know what to say after you say hi. Just as the first glimpse should please their eyes, your first word should delight their ears. Your tongue is a welcome mat embossed with either welcome or go away. To make your conversation partner feel welcome, you must master small talk. Small talk. Can you hear the shudder? Those two little words drive a stake into the hearts of some otherwise fearless and undaunted souls. Invite them to a party where they don't know anyone, and it mainlines queasiness into their veins. If this sounds familiar, take consolation from the fact that the brighter the individual, the more he or she detests small talk. When consulting for Fortune 500 companies, I was astounded. Top executives, completely comfortable making big talk with their boards of directors or addressing their stockholders, confessed they felt like little lost children at parties where the prater was less than prodigious. Small talk haters take further consolation from the fact that you are in star-studded company. Fear of small talk and stage fright are the same thing. The butterflies you feel in your stomach when you're in a room full of strangers flutter round the tummies of top performers. Pablo Casals complained of lifelong stage fright. Carly Simon curtailed live performances because of it. A friend of mine who worked with Neil Diamond said he insisted the words to Song Sung Blue, a tune he'd been crooning for 40 years, be displayed on his teleprompter, lest fear freeze him into forgetfulness. Is small talk-ophobia curable? Someday, scientists say, communication spheres may be treatable with drugs. They're already experimenting with Prozac to change people's personalities, but some fear disastrous side effects. The good news is that when human beings think and genuinely feel certain emotions, like confidence that they have specific techniques to fall back on, the brain manufactures its own antidotes. If fear and distaste of small talk is the disease, knowing solid techniques like the ones we explore in this section is the cure. Incidentally, science is beginning to recognize it's not chance or even upbringing that one person has a belly of butterflies and another doesn't. In our brains, neurons communicate through chemicals called neurotransmitters. Some people have excessive levels of a neurotransmitter called norepinephrine, a chemical cousin of adrenaline. For some children, just walking into a kindergarten room makes them want to run and hide under a table. As a tot, I spent a lot of time under the table. As a preteen in an all-girls boarding school, my legs turned to linguini every time I had to converse with a male. In 8th grade, I once had to invite a boy to our school prom. The entire selection of dancing males lived in the dormitory of our brother's school, and I only knew one resident, Eugene. I had met Eugene at summer camp the year before. Mustering all my courage, I decided to call him. 2 weeks before the dance, I felt the onset of sweaty palms. I put the call off. 1 week before, rapid heartbeats set in. I put the call off. Finally, 3 days before the big bash, breathing became difficult. Time was running out. The critical moment, I rationalized, would be easier if I read from a script. I wrote out the following. Hi, this is Leil. We met at camp last summer, remember? I programmed in a pause where I hoped he would say yes. Well, National Cathedral School's prom is this Saturday night, and I'd like you to be my date. I programmed in another pause where I prayed he'd say yes. On Thursday before the dance, I could no longer delay the inevitable. I picked up the receiver and dialed. Clutching the phone, waiting for Eugene to answer, my eyes followed perspiration droplets rolling down my arm and dripping off my elbow. A small, salty puddle was forming around my feet. Hello? A sexy, deep male voice answered the dorm phone. In faster-than-a-speeding-bullet voice, like a nervous novice telemarketer, I shot out, Hi, this is Leil. We met at camp last summer, remember? Forgetting to pause for his assent, I raced on. Well, National Cathedral School's prom is this Saturday night, and I'd like you to be my date. To my relief and delight, I heard a big, cheerful, Oh, that's great, I'd love to. I exhaled my first normal breath all day. He continued, I'll pick you up at the girls' dorm at 7:30. I'll have a pink carnation for you. Will that go with your dress? And my name is Donnie. Donnie? Donnie? Who said anything about Donnie? Well, Donnie turned out to be the best date I had that decade. Donnie had buck teeth, a head full of tousled red hair, and communication skills that immediately put me at ease. On Saturday night, Donnie greeted me at the door, carnation in hand and grin on face. He joked self-deprecatingly about how he was dying to go to the prom, so, knowing it was a case of mistaken identity, he accepted anyway. He told me he was thrilled when the girl with the lovely voice called, and he took full responsibility for tricking me into an invitation. Donnie made me comfortable and confident as we chatted. First, we made small talk, and then he gradually led me into subjects I was interested in. I flipped over Donnie, and he became my very first boyfriend. Donnie instinctively had the small talk skills that we are now going to fashion into techniques to help you glide through small talk like a hot knife through butter. When you master them, you will be able, like Donnie, to melt the heart of everyone you touch. The goal of How to Talk to Anyone is not, of course, to make you a small talk whiz and stop there. The aim is to make you a dynamic conversationalist and forceful communicator. However, small talk is the first crucial step toward that goal. 10. How to start great small talk. You've been there. You're introduced to someone at a party or business meeting. You shake hands, your eyes meet, and suddenly your entire body of knowledge dries up and thought processes come to a screeching halt. You fish for a topic to fill the awkward silence. Failing, your new contact slips away in the direction of the cheese tray. We want the first words falling from our lips to be sparkling, witty, and insightful. We want our listeners to immediately recognize how riveting we are. I was once at a gathering where everybody was sparkling, witty, insightful, and riveting. It drove me berserk because most of these same everybodies felt they had to prove it in their first 10 words or less. Several years ago, the Mensa organization, a social group of extremely bright individuals who score in the country's top 2% in intelligence, invited me to be a keynote speaker at their annual convention. Their cocktail party was in full swing in the lobby of the hotel as I arrived. After checking in, I hauled my bags through the horde of happy-hour Mensans to the elevator. The doors separated, and I stepped into an elevator packed with partygoers. As we began the journey up to our respective floors, the elevator gave several sleepy jerks. I remarked, in response to the elevator's sluggishness. The elevator seems a little flaky. Suddenly, each elevator occupant, feeling compelled to exhibit his or her 132-plus IQ, pounced forth with a thunderous explanation. "It's obviously got poor rail guide alignment," announced one. "The relay contact is not made up," declared another. Suddenly I felt like a grasshopper trapped in a stereo speaker. I couldn't wait to escape the attack of the mental giants. Afterward, in the solitude of my room, I thought back and reflected that the Mensans' answers were indeed interesting. Why then did I have an adverse reaction? I realized it was too much, too soon. I was tired. Their high energy and intensity jarred my sluggish state. You see, small talk is not about facts or words. It's about music, about melody. Small talk is about putting people at ease. It's about making comforting noises together like cats purring, children humming, or groups chanting. You must first match your listener's mood. Like repeating the note on the music teacher's harmonica, top communicators pick up on their listener's tone of voice and duplicate it. Instead of jumping in with such intensity, the Mensans could have momentarily matched my lethargic mood by saying, "Yes, it is slow, isn't it?" Had they then prefaced their information with, "Have you ever been curious why an elevator is slow?" I would have responded with a sincere, "Yes, I have." After a moment of equalized energy levels, I would have welcomed their explanations about the rail guard alignment or whatever the heck it was, and friendships might have started. I'm sure you've suffered the aggression of a mood mismatch. Have you ever been relaxing when some overexcited, hot-breathed colleague starts pounding you with questions? Or the reverse. You're late, rushing to a meeting, when an associate stops you and starts lazily narrating a long, languorous story. No matter how interesting the tale, you don't want to hear it now. The first step in starting a conversation without strangling it is to match your listener's mood, if only for a sentence or two. When it comes to small talk, think music, not words. Is your listener adagio or allegro? Match that pace. I call it make a mood match. Matching their mood can make or break the sale. Matching customers' moods is crucial for salespeople. Some years ago, I decided to throw a surprise party for my best friend Stella. It was going to be a triple whammy party because she was celebrating 3 events. 1, it was Stella's birthday. 2, she was newly engaged. And 3, Stella had just landed her dream job. She had been my buddy since grade school, and I was floating on air over her birthday engagement congratulations bash. I had heard one of the best French restaurants in town had an attractive back room for parties. About 5 p.m. one afternoon, I wafted happily into the restaurant and found the seated maître d' languidly looking over his reservation book. I began excitedly babbling about Stella's triple whammy celebration and asked to see that fabulous back room I'd heard so much about. Without a smile or moving a muscle, he said, "The room is in the back. You can go see it if you like." Crash! What a party pooper! His morose mood kicked all the party spirit out of me, and I no longer wanted to rent his stupid space. Before I even looked at the room, he lost the rental. I left his restaurant vowing to find a place where the management would at least appear to share the joy of the happy occasion. Every mother knows this instinctively. To quiet a whimpering infant, Mama doesn't just shake her finger and shout, "Quiet down!" No, Mama picks baby up. Mama cries, "Ooh, ooh, oh," sympathetically matching baby's misery for a few moments. Mama then gradually transitions the 2 of them into hush-hush happy sounds. Your listeners are all big babies. Match their mood if you want them to stop crying, start buying, or otherwise come round to your way of thinking. Technique number 10. Make a mood match. Before opening your mouth, take a voice sample of your listener to detect his or her state of mind. Take a psychic photograph of the expression to see if your listener looks buoyant, bored, or blitzed. If you ever want to bring people around to your thoughts, you must match their mood and voice tone, if only for a moment. 11. How to sound like you've got a super personality, no matter what you're saying. Once, while at a party, I spotted a fellow surrounded by a fan club of avid listeners. The chap was smiling, gesticulating, and obviously enthralling his audience. I went over to hearken to this fascinating speaker. I joined his throng of admirers and eavesdropped for a minute or 2. Suddenly, it dawned on me. The fellow was saying the most banal things. His script was dull, dull, dull. But he was delivering his prosaic observations with such passion, and therefore he held the group spellbound. It convinced me that it's not all what you say, it's how you say it. What's a good opening line when I meet people? I am often asked this question, and I give them the same answer a woman who once worked in my office always gave me. Dottie often stayed at her desk to work through lunch. Sometimes, as I was leaving for the sandwich shop, I'd ask her, "Hey, Dottie, what can I bring you back for lunch?" Dottie, trying to be obliging, would say, "Oh, anything is fine with me." "No, Dottie," I wanted to scream. "Tell me what you want. Ham and cheese on rye? Bologna on whole wheat, hold the mayo? Peanut butter and jelly with sliced bananas? Be specific. Anything is a hassle." Frustrating though it may be, my answer to the opening line question is anything, because almost anything you say really is okay, as long as it puts people at ease and sounds passionate. How do you put people at ease? By convincing them they are okay and that the 2 of you are similar. When you do that, you break down walls of fear, suspicion, and mistrust. Why banal makes a bond. Samuel I. Hayakawa was a college president, U.S. Senator, and brilliant linguistic analyst of Japanese origin. He tells us this story that shows the value of, as he says, unoriginal remarks. In early 1943, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, at a time when there were rumors of Japanese spies, Hayakawa had to wait several hours in a railroad station in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. He noticed others waiting in the station were staring at him suspiciously. Because of the war, they were apprehensive about his presence. He later wrote, "One couple with a small child was staring with special uneasiness and whispering to each other." So what did Hayakawa do? He made unoriginal remarks to set them at ease. He said to the husband that it was too bad the train should be late on so cold a night. The man agreed. "I went on," Hayakawa wrote, "to remark that it must be especially difficult to travel with a small child in winter when train schedules were so uncertain." Again the husband agreed. I then asked the child's age and remarked that their child looked very big and strong for his age. Again, agreement, this time with a slight smile. The tension was relaxing. After 2 or 3 more exchanges, the man asked Hayakawa, "I hope you don't mind my bringing it up, but you're Japanese, aren't you? Do you think the Japs have any chance of winning this war?" "Well," Hayakawa replied, "your guess is as good as mine. I don't know any more than I read in the papers. But the way I figure it, I don't see how the Japanese, with their lack of coal and steel and oil, can ever beat a powerfully industrialized nation like the United States." Hayakawa went on, "My remark was admittedly neither original nor well-informed. Hundreds of radio commentators were saying much the same thing during those weeks. But just because they were, the remark sounded familiar and was on the right side so that it was easy to agree with." The Wisconsin man agreed at once with what seemed like genuine relief. His next remark was, "Say, I hope your folks aren't over there while the war is going on." "Yes, they are," Hayakawa replied. "My father and mother and 2 young sisters are over there." "Do you ever hear from them?" the man asked. "How can I?" Hayakawa answered. Both the man and his wife looked troubled and sympathetic. "Do you mean you won't be able to see them or hear from them until after the war is over?" There was more to the conversation, but the result was, within 10 minutes they had invited Hayakawa, whom they initially may have suspected was a Japanese spy, to visit them sometime in their city and have dinner in their home. And all because of this brilliant scholar's admittedly common and unoriginal small talk. Top communicators know the most soothing and appropriate first word should be, like Senator Hayakawa's, unoriginal, even banal. But not indifferent. Hayakawa delivered his sentiments with sincerity and passion. Ascent from banality. It is not necessary, of course, to stay with mundane remarks. If you find your company displays cleverness or wit, you match that. The conversation then escalates naturally, compatibly. Don't rush it, or like the Mensons, you seem like you're showing off. The bottom line on your first words is to have the courage of your own triteness. Because remember, people tune in to your tone more than your text. Technique number 11. Prosaic with passion. Worried about your first words? Fear not, because 80% of your listener's impression has nothing to do with your words anyway. Almost anything you say at first is fine. No matter how prosaic the text, an empathetic mood, a positive demeanor, and passionate delivery make you sound exciting. Anything except liverwurst. Back to Dottie, waiting for her sandwich at her desk. Sometimes as I walked out the door scratching my head, wondering what to bring her, she'd call after me, "Anything except liverwurst, that is." "Thanks, Dottie. That's a little bit of help." Here's my anything except liverwurst on small talk. Anything you say is fine as long as it is not complaining, rude, or unpleasant. If the first words out of your mouth are a complaint, blam, people label you a complainer. Why? because that complaint is your new acquaintance's 100% sampling of you so far. You could be the happiest Pollyanna ever, but how will they know? If your first comment is a complaint, you're a griper. If your first words are rude, you're a creep. If your first words are unpleasant, you're a stinker. Open and shut. Other than these downers, anything goes. Ask them where they're from, how they know the host of the party, where they bought the lovely suit they're wearing, or hundreds of et ceteras. The trick is to ask your prosaic question with passion to get the other person talking. Still feel a bit shaky on making the approach to strangers? Let's take a quick detour on our road to meaningful communicating. I'll give you 3 quickie techniques to meet people at parties, then 9 more to make small talk not so small. 12. How to make people want to start a conversation with you. Singles proficient at meeting potential sweethearts without the benefit of introduction, in the vernacular, making a pickup, have developed a deliciously devious technique that works equally well for social or corporate networking purposes. The technique requires no exceptional skill on your part, only the courage to sport a simple visual prop called a what's-it. What's a what's-it? A what's-it is anything you wear or carry that is unusual. A unique pin, an interesting purse, a strange tie, or an amusing hat. A what's-it is any object that draws people's attention and inspires them to approach you and ask, what's that? Your what's-it can be as subtle or overt as your personality and the occasion permit. I wear around my neck an outmoded pair of glasses that resembles a double monocle. Often the curious have approached me at a gathering and asked, "What's it?" I explain it's a lorgnette, left to me by my grandmother, which, of course, paves the way to discuss hatred of glasses, aging eyes, love or loss of grandmothers, adoration of antique jewelry, anywhere the inquisitor wants to take it. Perhaps unknowingly, you have fallen prey to this soon-to-be legendary technique. At a gathering, have you ever noticed someone you would like to talk to? Then you've racked your brain to conjure an excuse to make the approach. What a bounty it was to discover that he or she was wearing some weird, wild, or wonderful something you could comment on. The What's-It Way to Love. Your What's-It is a social aid whether you seek business rewards or new romance. My friend Alexander carries Greek worry beads with him wherever he goes. He's not worried. He knows any woman who wants to talk to him will come up and say, "What's that?" Think about it, gentlemen. Suppose you're at a party. An attractive woman spots you across the room. She wants to talk to you, but she's thinking, "Well, mister, you're attractive, but golly, what can I say to you? You just ain't got no what's-it." Be a what's-it seeker, too. Likewise, become proficient in scrutinizing the apparel of those you wish to approach. Why not express interest in the handkerchief in the tycoon's vest pocket, the brooch on the bosom of the rich divorcee, or the school ring on the finger of the CEO whose company you want to work for? The big spender, who you suspect might buy 100 of your widgets, has a tiny golf club lapel pin? Say, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice your attractive lapel pin. Are you a golfer?" "Me too. What courses have you played?" Your business cards and your what's-it are crucial socializing artifacts. Whether you are riding in the elevator, climbing the doorstep, or traversing the path to the party, make sure your what's-it is hanging out for all to see. Technique number 12. Always wear a what's-it. Whenever you go to a gathering, wear or carry something unusual to give people who find you the delightful stranger across the crowded room an excuse to approach. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice your—" What is that? The next quickie technique was originated by doggedly determined politicians who don't let one partygoer escape if they think he or she could be helpful to their campaigns. I call it the who's that technique. 13. How to meet the people you want to meet. Say you have scrutinized the body of the important business contact you want to meet. You've searched in vain from the tip of his cowlick to the toes of his boots. He's not sporting a single what's-it. If you strike out on finding something to comment on, resort to the who's that technique. Like a persistent politician, go to the party giver and say, "That man or woman over there looks interesting. Who is he or she?" Then ask for an introduction. Don't be hesitant. The party giver will be pleased you find one of the guests interesting. If, however, you are loath to pull the party giver away from his or her other guests, you can still perform who's that. This time, don't ask for a formal introduction. Simply pump the party giver for just enough information to launch you. Find out about the stranger's jobs, interests, and hobbies. Suppose the party giver says, "Oh, that's Joe Smith. I'm not sure what his job is, but I know he loves to ski." Aha! You've just been given the icebreaker you need. Now you make a beeline for Joe Smith. "Hi, you're Joe Smith, aren't you? Susan was just telling me what a great skier you are. Where do you ski?" You get the idea. Technique number 13. Who's that? Who's that is the most effective, least used by non-politicians meeting people device ever contrived. Simply ask the party giver to make the introduction or pump for a few facts that you can immediately turn into icebreakers. Now, the third in our little trio of meeting who you want tricks. 14. How to break into a tight crowd. The woman you've decided you must meet is wearing no what's-it? Can't find the host for the who's that technique? To make matters worse, she's deep in conversation with a group of her friends. Seems quite hopeless that you will maneuver a meeting, doesn't it? You can't just say, "Excuse me, I just thought I'd eavesdrop in and say hello." No obstacle blocks the resolute politician, who always has a trick or 10 up his or her sleeve. A politico would resort to the eavesdrop-in technique. Eavesdropping, of course, conjures images of clandestine activities, wiretapping, Watergate break-ins, or spies skulking around in the murky shadows. Eavesdropping has historical precedent with politicians, so in a pinch, it naturally comes to mind. At parties, stand near the group of people you wish to infiltrate. Then wait for a word or two you can use as a wedge to break into the group. "Excuse me, I couldn't help overhearing that you—" and then whatever is relevant here. For example, "I couldn't help overhearing your discussion of Bermuda. I'm going there next month for the first time. Any suggestions?" Now you are in the circle and can direct your comments to your intended. Technique number 14. Eavesdrop in. No what's-it? No host for who's that? No problem. Just sidle up behind the swarm of folks you want to infiltrate and open your ears. Wait for any flimsy excuse and jump in with, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear." Will they be taken aback? Momentarily. Will they get over it? Momentarily. Will you be in the conversation? Absolutely. Let us now hop back on the train that first explored Small Talk City and travel to the land of meaningful communicating. 15. How to make "Where are you from?" sound exciting. You wouldn't dream of going to a party naked, and I hope you wouldn't dream of letting your conversation be exposed naked and defenseless against the two inevitable assaults, "Where are you from?" and "What do you do?" When asked these questions, most people, like clunking a frozen steak on a china platter, drop a brick of frozen geography or baffling job title on the asker's conversational platter. Then they slap on the muzzle. You're at a convention. Everyone you meet will, of course, ask, "And where are you from?" When you give them the short-form naked city answer, "Oh, I'm from Muscatine, Iowa," or Millinocket, Maine, Winnemucca, Nevada, or anywhere they haven't heard of. What can you expect except a blank stare? Even if you're a relatively big city slicker from Denver, Colorado, Detroit, Michigan, or San Diego, California, you'll receive a panicked look from all but American history professors. They're rapidly racking their brains thinking, what do I say next? Even the names of world-class burgs like New York, Chicago, Washington, and Los Angeles inspire less than riveting responses. When I tell people I'm from New York City, what are they expected to say? Seen any good muggings lately? Do humanity and yourself a favor. Never ever give just a one-sentence response to the question, where are you from? Give the asker some fuel for his tank, some fodder for his trough. Give the hungry communicator something to conversationally nibble on. All it takes is an extra sentence or two about your city, some interesting fact, some witty observation, to hook the asker into the conversation. Several months ago, a trade association invited me to be its keynote speaker on networking and teaching people to be better conversationalists. Just before my speech, I was introduced to Mrs. Devlin, who was the head of the association. "How do you do?" she asked. "How do you do?" I replied. Then Mrs. Devlin smiled, anxiously awaiting a sample of my stimulating conversational expertise. I asked her where she was from. She plunked a frozen Columbus, Ohio, and a big expectant grin on my platter. I had to quickly thaw her answer into digestible conversation. My mind thrashed into action. Leil's thought pattern. Gulp. Columbus, Ohio. I've never been there. Criminy, what do I know about Columbus? I know a fellow named Jeff, a successful speaker who lives there. But Columbus is too big to ask if she knows him. And besides, only kids play the do-you-know-so-and-so game. My panicked, silent search continued. I think it's named after Christopher Columbus, but I'm not sure, so I better keep my mouth shut on that one. 4 or 5 other possibilities raced through my mind, but I rejected them all as too obvious, too adolescent, or too off the wall. I realized by now that seconds had passed, and Mrs. Devlin was still standing there with a slowly dissipating smile on her face. She was waiting for me, the expert, who within the hour was expected to teach her trade association lessons on scintillating conversation, to spew forth words of wit or wisdom. "Oh, Columbus, gee," I mumbled in desperation, watching her face fall into the worried expression of a patient being asked by the surgeon, knife poised in hand, "Where's your appendix?" I never came up with stimulating conversation on Columbus, but just then, under the knife, I created the following technique for posterity. I call it Never the Naked City. Technique number 15. Never the Naked City. Whenever someone asks you the inevitable, "And where are you from?" never ever unfairly challenge their powers of imagination with a one-word answer. Learn some engaging facts about your hometown that conversational partners can comment on. Then, when they say something clever in response to your bait, they think you're a great conversationalist. Different bait for shrimp or sharks. A fisherman uses different bait to bag bass or bluefish, and you will obviously throw out different conversational bait to snag simple shrimp or sophisticated sharks. Your hook should relate to the type of person you're speaking with. I'm originally from Washington, D.C. If someone at, say, an art gallery asked me where I was from, I might answer Washington, D.C., designed, you know, by the same city planner who designed Paris. This opens the conversational possibilities to the artistry of city planning, Paris, other cities' plans, European travel, and so forth. At a social party of singles, I'd opt for another answer. I'm from Washington, D.C. The reason I left is there were 7 women to every man when I was growing up. Now the conversation can turn to the ecstasy or agony of being single, the perceived lack of desirable men everywhere, or even flirtatious possibilities. In a political group, I'd cast a current fact from the constantly evolving political face of Washington. No need to speculate on the multitude of conversational possibilities that unlocks. Where do you get your conversational bait? Start by phoning the Chamber of Commerce or Historical Society of your town. Search the World Wide Web and click on your town, or open an old-fashioned encyclopedia. All rich sources for future stimulating conversations. Learn some history, geography, business statistics, or perhaps a few fun facts to tickle future friends' funny bones. The Devlin debacle inspired further research. The minute I got home, I called the Columbus Chamber of Commerce and the Historical Society. Say you too are from Columbus, Ohio, and your new acquaintance lays it on you. Where are you from? When you are talking with a business person, your answer could be, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. You know, many major corporations do their product testing in Columbus because it's so commercially typical. In fact, it's been called the most American city in America. They say if it booms or bombs in Columbus, it booms or bombs nationally. Talking with someone with a German last name? Tell her about Columbus's historic German village with the brick streets and the wonderful 1850s-style little houses. It's bound to inspire stories of the old country. Your conversation partner's surname is Italian. Tell him Genoa, Italy is Columbus's sister city. Talking with an American history buff? Tell him that Columbus was indeed named after Christopher Columbus, and that a replica of the Santa Maria is anchored in the Scioto River. Talking with a student? Tell her about the 5 universities in Columbus. The possibilities continue. You suspect your conversation partner has an artistic bent? Ah, you throw out casually. Columbus is the home of artist George Bellows. Columbusites, prepare some tasty snacks for askers, even if you know nothing about them. Here's a goodie. Tell them you always have to say Columbus, Ohio, because there is also a Columbus, Arkansas, Columbus, Georgia, Columbus, Indiana, Columbus, Kansas, Columbus, Kentucky, Columbus, Mississippi, Columbus, Montana, Columbus, Nebraska, Columbus, New Jersey, Columbus, New Mexico, Columbus, North Carolina, Columbus, North Dakota, Columbus, Pennsylvania, Columbus, Texas, and Columbus, Wisconsin. That spreads the conversational possibilities to 15 other states. Remember, as a quotable notable once said, no man would listen to you talk if he didn't know it was his turn next. A postscript to the hellish experience I had with Columbus. Months later, I mentioned the trauma to my speaker friend from Columbus, Jeff. Jeff explained his house was really in a smaller town just minutes outside Columbus. What town, Jeff? Gehenna, Ohio. Gehenna means hell in Hebrew, he said, and then went on to explain why he thought ancient Hebrew historians were clairvoyant. Thanks, Jeff. I knew you'd never lay a naked city on any of your listeners. 16. How to come out a winner every time they ask, and what do you do? Third only to death and taxes is the assurance a new acquaintance will soon chirp, and what do you do? Is it fitting and proper they should make that query? We'll pick up that sticky wicket later. For the moment, these few defensive moves help you keep your crackerjack communicator credentials when asked the inevitable question. First, like Never the Naked City, don't toss a short shrift answer in response to the asker's breathless inquiry. You leave the poor fish flopping on the deck when you just say your title. I'm an actuary, an auditor, an author, an astrophysicist. Have mercy so he or she doesn't feel like a nincompoop outsider asking, what kind of actualizing, auditing, authoring, or astrophysicizing do you do? You're an attorney. Don't leave it to laymen to try to figure out what you really do. Flesh it out. Tell a little story your conversation partner can get a handle on. For example, if you're talking with a young mother, say, "I'm an attorney. Our firm specializes in employment law. In fact, now I'm involved in a case where a company actually discharged a woman for taking extra maternity leave that was a medical necessity." A mother can relate to that. Talking with a business owner, say, "I'm an attorney. Our firm specializes in employment law. My current case concerns an employer who is being sued by one of her staff for asking personal questions during the initial job interview." A business owner can relate to that. Technique number 16. Never the naked job. When asked the inevitable, "And what do?" you may think, "I'm an economist, an educator, an engineer," is giving enough information to engender good conversation. However, to one who is not an economist, educator, or an engineer, you might as well be saying, "I'm a paleontologist, psychoanalyst, pornographer." Flesh it out. Throw out some delicious facts about your job for new acquaintances to munch on. Otherwise, they'll soon excuse themselves, preferring the snacks back at the cheese tray. Painful memories of naked job flashers. I still harbor painful recollections of being tongue-tied when confronted by naked job flashers. Like the time a fellow at a dinner party told me, "I'm a nuclear scientist." My weak, "Oh, that must be fascinating," reduced me to a mental molecule in his eyes. The chap on my other side announced, "I'm in industrial abrasives," and then paused, waiting for me to be impressed. My, "Well, golly, you must have to be a shrewd judge of character to be in industrial abrasives," didn't fly either. We three sat in silence the rest of the meal. Just last month, a new acquaintance bragged, "I'm planning to teach Tibetan Buddhism at Truckee Meadows Community College," and then clammed up. I knew less about Truckee Meadows than I did about Tibetan Buddhism. Whenever people ask you what you do, give them some mouth-to-ear resuscitation so they can catch their breath and say something. 17. How to introduce people like the hostess with the mostest. It is important to help newly-mets through their first nervous moments. "Susan, I'd like you to meet John Smith. John, this is Susan Jones." Duh, what do you expect John and Susan to say? "Smith? That's S-M-I-T-H, isn't it?" Golly, Susan, well now that's an interesting name." Nice try, forget it. Don't blame John or Susan for being less than scintillating. The fault lies with the person who introduced the two the way most people introduce their friends to each other, with naked names. They cast out a line with no bait for people to sink their teeth into. Big winners may not talk a lot, but conversation never dies unwillingly in their midst. They make sure of it with techniques like never the naked introduction. When they introduce people, they buy an insurance policy on the conversation with a few simple add-ons. "Susan, I'd like you to meet John. John has a wonderful boat we took a trip on last summer. John, this is Susan Smith. Susan is editor-in-chief of Shoestring Gourmet magazine." Padding the introduction gives Susan the opportunity to ask what kind of boat John has or where the group went. It gives John an opening to discuss his love of writing, or of cooking, or of food. The conversation can then naturally expand to travel in general, life on boats, past vacations, favorite recipes, restaurants, budgets, diets, magazines, editorial policy, to infinity. If you're not comfortable mentioning someone's job during the introduction, mention their hobby or even a talent. The other day at a gathering, the hostess introduced a man named Gilbert. She said, "Leil, I'd like you to meet Gilbert. Gilbert's gift is sculpting. He makes beautiful wax carvings." I remember thinking, gift. Now that's a lovely way to introduce someone and induce conversation. Technique number 17. Never the naked introduction. When introducing people, don't throw out an unbaited hook and stand there grinning like a big clam, leaving the newlymets to flutter their fins and fish for a topic. Bait the conversational hook to get them in the swim of things. Then you're free to stay or float on to the next networking opportunity. Armed with these 2 personality enhancers, 3 conversation igniters, and 3 small extenders, it is time to take a step up the communications ladder. Let us now rise from small talk and seek the path to more meaningful dialogue. The next technique is guaranteed to make the exchange engrossing for your conversation partner. 18. How to resuscitate a dying conversation. Even a well-intentioned husband who might ask his wife while making love, "Is it good for you too, honey?" knows not to ask a colleague, "Is the conversation good for you too?" Yet he wonders. We all do. With the following technique, set your mind at rest. You can definitely make the conversation hot for anyone with whom you speak. Like my prom date Donnie, you will miraculously find subjects to engross your listeners. Be a sleuth on their slips of the tongue. No matter how elusive the clue, Sherlock Holmes is confident he'll soon be staring right at it through his magnifying glass. Like the unerring detective, big winners know, no matter how elusive the clue, they'll find the right topic. How? They become word detectives. I have a young friend, Nancy, who works in a nursing home. Nancy cares deeply about the elderly, but often grumbles about how crotchety and laconic some of her patients are. She laments she has difficulty relating to them. Nancy told me about one especially cantankerous old woman named Mrs. Otis, whom she could never get to open up to her. One day, Nancy confided, right after all those rainstorms we had last week, just to make conversation, I remarked to Mrs. Otis, "Terrible storms we had last week, don't you think?" "Well," Nancy continued, Mrs. Otis practically jumped down my throat. She said in a snippy voice, "It's been good for the plants." I asked Nancy how she responded to that. "What could I say?" Nancy answered. The woman was obviously cutting me off. "Did you ever think to ask Mrs. Otis if she liked plants?" "Plants?" Nancy asked. "Well, yes," I suggested. Mrs. Otis brought the subject up. I asked Nancy to do me a favor. "Ask her," I begged. Nancy resisted, but I persisted. Just to quiet me down, Nancy promised to ask cantankerous old Mrs. Otis if she liked plants. The next day, a flabbergasted Nancy called me from work. "Leil, how did you know? Not only did Mrs. Otis love plants, but she told me she'd been married to a gardener. Today I had a different problem with Mrs. Otis. I couldn't shut her up. She went on and on about her garden, her husband." Top communicators know ideas don't come out of nowhere. If Mrs. Otis thought to bring up plants, then she must have some relationship with them. Furthermore, by mentioning the word, it meant subconsciously she wanted to talk about plants. Suppose, for example, instead of responding to Nancy's comment about the rain with, "It's good for the plants," Mrs. Otis had said, "Because of the rain, my dog couldn't go out." Nancy could then ask about her dog. Or suppose she grumbled, "It's bad for my arthritis." Can you guess what old Mrs. Otis wants to talk about now? When talking with anyone, keep your ears open and, like a good detective, listen for clues. Be on the lookout for any unusual references, any anomaly, deviation, digression, or invocation of another place, time, person. Ask about it because it's the clue to what your conversation partner would really enjoy discussing. If two people have something in common, when the shared interest comes up, they jump on it naturally. For example, if someone mentions playing squash, birdwatching, or stamp collecting, and the listener shares that passion, he or she pipes up, "Oh, you're a squasher, or birder, or philatelist, too." Here's the trick. There's no need to be a squasher, birder, or philatelist to pipe up with enthusiasm. You can simply be a word detective. When you pick up on the reference as though it excites you too, it parlays you into conversation the stranger thrills to. The subject may put your feet to sleep, but that's another story. Technique number 18. Be a word detective. Like a good gumshoe, listen to your conversation partner's every word for clues to his or her preferred topic. The evidence is bound to slip out. Then spring on that subject like a sleuth onto a slip of the tongue. Like Sherlock Holmes, you have the clue to the subject that's hot for the other person. Now that you've ignited stimulating conversation, let's explore a technique to keep it hot. 19. How to enthrall 'em with your choice of topic, them. Several years ago, a girlfriend and I attended a party saturated with a hodgepodge of swelligant folks. Everyone we talked to seemed to lead a nifty life. Discussing the party afterward, I asked my friend, "Diane, of all the exciting people at the party, who did you enjoy talking to most?" Without hesitation, she said, "Oh, by far, Dan Smith." "What does Dan do?" I asked her. Well, I'm not sure," she answered. "Where does he live?" I don't know," Diane responded. "Well, what is he interested in?" "Well, we really didn't talk about his interests." "Diane," I asked, "what did you talk about?" "Well, I guess we talked mostly about me." Aha, I thought. Diane has just rubbed noses with a winner. As it turns out, I had the pleasure of meeting Big Winner Dan several months later. Diane's ignorance about his life piqued my curiosity, so I grilled him for details. As it turns out, Dan lives in Paris, has a beach home in the south of France, and a mountain home in the Alps. He travels around the world producing sound and light shows for pyramids and ancient ruins. And he is an avid hang glider and scuba diver. Does this man have an interesting life or what? Yet Dan, when meeting Diane, said nothing about himself. I told Dan about how pleased Diane was to meet him, yet how little she learned about his life. Dan simply replied, "Well, when I meet someone, I learn so much more if I ask about their life. I always try to turn the spotlight on the other person." Truly confident people often do this. They know they grow more by listening than talking. Obviously, they also captivate the talker. Sell yourself with a top sales technique. Several months ago at a speakers convention, I was talking with a colleague, Brian Tracy. Brian does a brilliant job of training top salespeople. He tells his students of a giant spotlight that, when shining on their product, is not as interesting to the prospect. When they shine the spotlight on the prospect, they make the sale. Salespeople, this technique is especially crucial for you. Keep your swiveling spotlight aimed away from you, only lightly on your product, and most brightly on your buyer. You'll do a much better job of selling yourself and your product. Technique number 19. The swiveling spotlight. When you meet someone, imagine a giant revolving spotlight between you. When you're talking, the spotlight is on you. When the new person is speaking, it's shining on him or her. If you shine it brightly enough, the stranger will be blinded to the fact that you have hardly said a word about yourself. The longer you keep it shining away from you, the more interesting he or she finds you. 20. How to never need to wonder, what do I say next? Moments arise, of course, when even conversationalists extraordinaire hit the wall. Some folks' monosyllabic grunts leave slim pickings even for masters of the be-a-word detective technique. If you find yourself futilely fanning the embers of a dying conversation, and if you feel, for political reasons or human compassion, that the conversation should continue, here's a foolproof trick to get the fire blazing again. I call it parroting, after that beautiful tropical bird that captures everyone's heart simply by repeating other people's words. Have you ever, puttering around the house, had the TV in the background tuned to a tennis game? You hear the ball going back and forth over the net. Clink clunk, clink clunk, clink. This time you don't hear the clunk. The ball didn't hit the court. What happened? You immediately look up at the set. Likewise, in conversation, the conversational ball goes back and forth. First you speak, then your partner speaks, you speak, and so it goes back and forth. Each time through a series of nods and comforting grunts like, or, You let your conversation partner know the ball has landed in your court. It's your, I got it signal. Such is the rhythm of conversation. What do I say next? Back to that frightfully familiar moment when it is your turn to speak but your mind goes blank. Don't panic. Instead of signaling verbally or non-verbally that you got it, simply repeat, or parrot, the last 2 or 3 words your companion said, in a sympathetic, questioning tone. That throws the conversational ball right back in your partner's court. My friend Phil sometimes picks me up at the airport. Usually I am so exhausted that I rudely fall asleep in the passenger seat, relegating Phil to nothing more than a chauffeur. After one especially exhausting trip some years ago, I flung my bags in his trunk and flopped onto the front seat. As I was dozing off, he mentioned he'd gone to the theater the night before. Usually, I would have just grunted and wafted into unconsciousness. However, on this particular trip, I had learned the parroting technique and was eager to try it. "Theater?" I parroted quizzically. "Yes, it was a great show," he replied, fully expecting it to be the last word on the subject before I fell into my usual sleepy stupor. "Great show?" I parroted. Pleasantly surprised by my interest, he said, "Yes, it's a new show by Stephen Sondheim called Sweeney Todd." "Sweeney Todd?" I again parroted. Now Phil was getting fired up. "Yeah, great music and an unbelievably bizarre story." "Bizarre story?" I parroted. Well, that's all Phil needed. For the next half an hour, Phil told me the show's story about a London barber who went around murdering people. I half dozed, but soon decided his tale of Sweeney Todd's cutting off people's heads was disturbing my sleepy reverie. So I simply backed up and parroted one of his previous phrases to get him on another track. "You said it had great music?" That did the trick. For the rest of the 45-minute trip to my home, Phil sang me Pretty Women, The Best Pies in London, and other songs from Sweeney Todd. Much better accompaniment for my demi-nap. I'm sure to this day Phil thinks of that trip as one of the best conversations we ever had. And all I did was parrot a few of his phrases. Technique number 20. Parroting. Never be left speechless again. Like a parrot, simply repeat the last few words your conversation partner says. That puts the ball right back in his or her court, and then all you need to do is listen. Salespeople, why go on a wild goose chase for a customer's real objections when it's so easy to shake them out of the trees with parroting? Parroting your way to profits. Parroting is also a can opener to pry open people's real feelings. Star salespeople use it to get to their prospects' emotional objections, which they often don't even articulate to themselves. A friend of mine, Paul, a used car salesman, told me he credits a recent sale of a Lamborghini to parroting. Paul was walking around the lot with a prospect and his wife, who had expressed interest in a sensible car. He was showing them every sensible Chevy and Ford on the lot. As they were looking at one very sensible family car, Paul asked the husband what he thought of it. "Well," he mused, "I'm not sure this car is right for me." Instead of moving on to the next sensible car, Paul parroted, "Right for you?" Paul's questioning inflection signaled the prospect that he needed to say more. "Well, yeah," the prospect mumbled. I'm not sure it fits my personality." "Fits your personality?" Paul again parroted. "You know, maybe I need something a little more sporty." "A little more sporty?" Paul parroted. "Well, those cars over there look a little more sporty." Aha! Paul's parrot had ferreted out which cars to show the customer. As they walked over toward a Lamborghini on the lot, Paul saw the prospect's eyes light up. An hour later, Paul had pocketed a fat commission. Want to take a rest from talking to save your throat? This next technique gets your conversation partner off and running, so all you have to do is listen. Or even sneak off unnoticed as he or she chats congenially away. 21. How to get 'em happily chatting, so you can slip away if you want to. Every father smiles when his little tyke beseeches him at bedtime, "Daddy, Daddy, tell me the story again of the 3 little pigs," or the dancing princesses, or how you and Mommy met. Daddy knows Junior enjoyed the story so much the first time he wants to hear it again and again. Junior inspires the following technique called Encore, which serves 2 purposes. Encore makes a colleague feel like a happy dad, and it's a great way to give dying conversation a heart transplant. I once worked on a ship that had Italian officers and mostly American passengers. Each week, the deck officers were required to attend the captain's cocktail party. After the captain's address in charmingly broken English, the officers invariably clumped together, yakking it up in Italian. Needless to say, most of the passengers' grasp of Italian ended at macaroni, spaghetti, salami, and pizza. As cruise director, it fell on my shoulders to get the officers to mingle with the passengers. My not-so-subtle tactic was to grab one of the officer's arms and literally drag him over to a smiling throng of expectant passengers. I would then introduce the officer and pray that either the cat would release his tongue or a passenger would come up with a more original question than, "Gee, if all you officers are here, who is driving the boat?" Never happened. I dreaded the weekly captain's cocktail party. One night, sleeping in my cabin, I was awakened by the ship rocking violently from side to side. I listened, and the engines were off. A bad sign. I grabbed my robe and raced up to the deck. Through the dense fog, I could barely discern another ship not half a mile from us. 5 or 6 officers were grasping the starboard guardrail and leaning overboard. I rushed over just in time to see a man in the moonlight with a bandage over one eye struggling up our violently rocking ladder. The officers immediately whisked him off to our ship's hospital. The engine started again, and we were on our way. The next morning, I got the full story. A laborer on the other ship, a freighter, had been drilling a hole in an engine cylinder. While he was working, a sharp, needle-thin piece of metal shot like a missile into his right eye. The freighter had no doctor on board, so the ship broadcast an emergency signal. International sea laws dictate that any ship hearing a distress signal must respond. Our ship came to the rescue, and the seaman, clutching his bleeding eye, was lowered into a lifeboat that brought him to our ship. Dr. Rossi, our ship's doctor, was successfully able to remove the needle from the workman's eye, thus saving his eyesight. Tell him about the time you... Cut to the next captain's cocktail party. Once again, I was faced with the familiar challenge of getting officers to mingle and make small talk with the passengers. I made my weekly trek to the laconic officers' throng to drag 1 or 2 away, and, this time, my hand fell on the arm of the ship's doctor. I hauled him over to the nearest group of grinning passengers and introduced him. I then said, "Just last week, Dr. Rossi saved the eyesight of a seaman on another ship after a dramatic midnight rescue. Dr. Rossi, I'm sure these folks would love to hear about it." It was like a magic wand. To my amazement, it was as though Dr. Rossi was blessed instantly with the tongues of angels. His previously monosyllabic broken English became thickly accented eloquence. He recounted the entire story for the growing group of passengers gathering around him. I left the throng that Dr. Rossi enraptured to pull another officer over to an awaiting audience. I grabbed the captain's stripe-covered arm, dragged him over to another pack of smiling passengers, and said, "Captain Caffiero, why don't you tell these folks about the dramatic midnight rescue you made last week?" The cat released Caffiero's tongue, and he was off and running. Back to the throng to get the first officer for the next group. By now, I knew I had a winner. "Senor Salvago, why don't you tell these folks how you awakened the captain at midnight last week for the dramatic midnight rescue?" By then, it was time to go back to extract the ship's doctor from the first bevy and take him to his next pack of passengers. It worked even better the second time. He happily commenced his encore for the second audience. As he chatted away, I raced back to the captain to pull him away for a second telling with another throng. I felt like the circus juggler who keeps all the plates spinning on sticks. Just as I got one conversation spinning, I had to race back to the first speaker to give him a whirl at another audience. The captain's cocktail parties were a breeze for me for the rest of the season. The three officers loved telling the same story of their heroism to new people every cruise. The only problem was I noticed the stories getting longer and more elaborate each time. I had to adjust my timing in getting them to do a repeat performance for the next audience. "Play it again, Sam." Encore is what appreciative audiences chant when they want another song from the singer, another dance from the dancer, another poem from the poet, and in my case, another storytelling from the officers. Encore is the technique you can use to request a repeat story from a prospect, potential employer, or valued acquaintance. While the two of you are chatting with a group of people, simply turn to him and say, "John, I bet everyone would love to hear about the time you caught that 30-pound striped bass." Or, "Susan, tell everyone that story you just told me of how you rescued the kitten from the tree." He or she will, of course, demur. Insist. Your conversation partner is secretly loving it. The subtext of your request is, "That story of yours was so terrific, I want my other friends to hear it." After all, only crowd pleasers are asked to do an encore. Technique number 21. Encore. The sweetest sound a performer can hear welling up out of the applause is "Encore, encore, let's hear it again." The sweetest sound your conversation partner can hear from your lips when you're talking with a group of people is, "Tell them about the time you—" Whenever you're at a meeting or party with someone important to you, think of some stories he or she told you. Choose an appropriate one from their repertoire that the crowd will enjoy. Then shine the spotlight by requesting a repeat performance. The added benefit of this technique is that once you've got them up and running with their conversation, you can sneak off and find more interesting company. One word of warning. Make sure the story you request is one in which the teller shines. No one wants to retell the time they lost the sale, cracked up the car, or broke up the bar and spent the night in jail. Make sure your requested encore is a positive story where they come out the big winner, not the buffoon. The full beauty of this technique will hit you like a happy thunderbolt the first time you use it with someone who is telling a long and wearisome tale. You simply tiptoe away and let the bore spin the story on and on with your friend. Of course, your friend may never speak to you again, but that's not germane to this chapter. The next technique deals with sharing some positive stories of your life. 22. How to come across as a positive person. Often people think when they meet someone they like, they should share a secret, reveal an intimacy, or make a confession of sorts to show they are human too. Airing your youthful battle with bedwetting, teeth-grinding, or thumb-sucking, or your present struggle with gout or a goiter, supposedly endears you to the masses. Well, sometimes it does, One study showed that if someone is above you in stature, their revealing a foible brings them closer to you. The holes in the bottom of presidential candidate Adlai Stevenson's shoes charmed a nation, as did George H.W. Bush's shocking admission that he couldn't stomach broccoli. If you're on sure footing, say a superstar who wants to become friends with a fan, go ahead and tell your devotees about the time you were out of work and penniless. But if you're not a superstar, better play it safe and keep the skeletons in the closet until later. People don't know you well enough to put your foible in context. Later in a relationship, telling your new friend you've been thrice married, you got caught shoplifting as a teenager, and you got turned down for a big job may be no big deal. And that may be the extent of what could be construed as black marks on an otherwise flawless life of solid relationships, no misdemeanors, and an impressive professional record. But very early in a relationship, the instinctive reaction is, what else is coming? If he shares that with me so quickly, what else is he hiding? A closet full of ex-spouses? A criminal record? Walls papered with rejection letters? Your new acquaintance has no way of knowing your confession was a generous act, a well-intentioned revelation on your part. Technique number 22. Accentuate the positive. When first meeting someone, lock your closet door and save your skeletons for later. You and your new good friend can invite the skeletons out, have a good laugh, and dance over their bones later in the relationship. But now's the time, as the old song says, to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. So far in this section, you have found assertive methods for meeting people and mastering small talk. The next is both an assertive and defensive move to help spare you that pasty smile we tend to sport when we have no idea what people are talking about. 23. How to always have something interesting to say. You've heard folks whine, "I can't go to the party, I haven't got a thing to wear." When was the last time you heard, "I can't go to the party, I haven't got a thing to say"? When going to a gathering with great networking possibilities, you naturally plan your outfit and make sure your shoes will match. And of course, you must have just the right tie or correct color lipstick. You puff your hair, pack your business cards, and you're off. Whoa, wait a minute. Didn't you forget the most important thing? What about the right conversation to enhance your image? Are you actually going to say anything that comes to mind, or doesn't, at the moment? You wouldn't don the first outfit your groping hand hits in the darkened closet, so you shouldn't leave your conversing to the first thought that comes to mind when facing a group of expectant, smiling faces. You will, of course, follow your instincts in conversation, but at least be prepared in case inspiration doesn't hit. The best way to ensure you're conversationally in the swing of things is to listen to a newscast just before you leave. What's happening right now in the world, all the fires, floods, air disasters, toppled governments, and stock market crashes, pulverizes into great conversational fodder, no matter what crowd you're circulating in. It is with some embarrassment that I must attribute the following technique to a businesswoman in the world's oldest profession. For a magazine article I was writing, I interviewed one of the savviest operators in her field, Sydney Biddle Barrows, the famed Mayflower Madam. Sydney told me she had a house rule when she was in business. All of her female independent contractors were directed to keep up with the daily news so they could be good conversationalists with their clients. This was not just Sydney's whim. Feedback from her employees had revealed that 60% of her girls' work hour was spent in chatting, and only 40% in satisfying the customer's needs. Thus, she instructed them to read the daily newspaper or listen to a radio broadcast before leaving for an appointment. Sydney told me when she initiated this rule, her business increased significantly. Reports came back from her clients complimenting her on the fascinating women she had working for her. The consummate businesswoman, Ms. Barrows always strove to exceed her customers' expectations. Technique number 23. The latest news. Don't leave home without it. The last move to make before leaving for the party, even after you've given yourself final approval in the mirror, is to turn on the radio news or scan your newspaper. Anything that happened today is good material. Knowing the big deal news of the moment is also a defensive move that rescues you from putting your foot in your mouth by asking what everybody's talking about. Foot in mouth is not very tasty in public, especially when it's surrounded by egg on face. Ready for the big leagues of conversation? Let's go. Part 3. How to talk like a VIP. Welcome to the human jungle. When two tigers prowling through the jungle chance upon one another in a clearing, they look at each other. They freeze. Instinctively they calculate, if our staring came to hissing, came to scratching, came to clawing, who would win? Which of us has the stronger survival skills? Tigers in the wilderness differ little from the urban upright animals inhabiting the corporate jungle, or singles jungle, or social jungle. Humans start the process by looking at each other and talking. In the business world, while smiling and uttering, "How do you do?" "Hello," "Howdy," or "Hi," they are, like tigers, instinctively, instantaneously, sizing each other up. They're not calculating the length of each other's claws or the sharpness of their teeth. They're judging each other on a weapon far more powerful to survival as they have defined it. Humans are judging each other's communication skills. Although they may not know the names of the specific studies first proving it, they sense the truth. 85% of one's success in life is directly due to communication skills. They may not be familiar with the U.S. Census Bureau's recent survey showing employers choose candidates with good communication skills and attitude way over education, experience, and training. But they know communication skills get people to the top. Thus, by observing each other carefully during casual conversing, it becomes almost immediately evident to both which is the bigger cat in the human jungle. It doesn't take long for people to recognize who is an important person. One cliché, one insensitive remark, one over-anxious reaction, and you can be professionally or personally demoted. You can lose a potentially important friendship or business contact. One stupid move and you can tumble off the corporate or social ladder. The techniques in this section will help ensure that you make all the right moves so this doesn't happen. The following communication skills give you a leg up to start your ascent to the top of any ladder you choose. 24. How to find out what they do without even asking. To size each other up, the first question little cats flat-pawedly ask each other is, "And what do you do, Then they crouch there, quivering their whiskers and twitching their noses with an obvious, "I'm going to pronounce silent judgment on you after you answer" look on their pusses. Big cats never ask outright, "What do you do?" Oh, they find out all right, in a much more subtle manner. By not asking the question, the big boys and big girls come across as more principled, even spiritual. After all, their silence says, a man or woman is far more than his or her job. Resisting the tempting question also shows their sensitivity. With so much downsizing, right-sizing, and capsizing of corporations these days, the blunt interrogation evokes uneasiness. The job question is not just unpleasant for those who are between engagements. I have several gainfully employed friends who hate being asked, "And what do you do?" One of these folks cuts cadavers for autopsies, the other is an IRS collection agent. Additionally, millions of talented and accomplished women have chosen to devote themselves to motherhood. When the cruel corporate question is thrust at them, they feel guilty. The rude interrogation belittles their commitment to their families. No matter how the women answer, they fear the asker is only going to hear a humble, "I'm just a housewife." Big boys and big girls should avoid asking, "What do you do?" for another reason. Their abstinence from the question leads listeners to believe that they are in the habit of soaring with a high-flying crowd. Recently, I attended a posh party on Easy Street. I suspect they invited me as their token working-class person. I noticed no one was asking anyone what they did, because these swells didn't do anything. Oh, some might have a ticker tape on the bed table of their mansion to track investments, but they definitely did not work for a living. The final benefit to not asking, "What do you do?" is it throws people off guard. It convinces them that you are enjoying their company for who they are, not for any crass networking reason. Technique number 24. What do you do not? A sure sign you're a somebody is the conspicuous absence of the question, "What do you do?" You determine this, of course, but not with those 4 dirty words that label you as either a ruthless networker, a social climber, a gold-digging husband or wife hunter, or someone who's never strolled along Easy Street. The right way to find out. So how do you find out what someone does for a living? I thought you'd never ask. You simply practice the following 8 words. All together now. How do you spend most of your time? How do you spend most of your time is the gracious way to let a cadaver cutter, a tax collector, or a capsized employee off the hook. It's the way to reinforce an accomplished mother's choice. It's the way to assure a spiritual soul you see his or her inner beauty. It's a way to suggest to a swell that you reside on Easy Street too. Now, suppose you've just made the acquaintance of someone who does like to talk about his or her work. Asking, "How do you spend most of your time?" also opens the door for workaholics to spout off. "Oh, golly," they mock moan, "I just spend all my time working." That, of course, is your invitation to grill them for details. Then they'll talk your ear off. Yet the new wording of your question gives those who are somewhere between at leisure and work-addicted the choice of telling you about their job or not. Finally, asking, "How do you spend most of your time?" instead of, "And what do you do?" gives you your big cat stripes right off. 25. How to know what to say when they ask, "What do you do?" Now, 99% of the people you meet will, of course, ask, "And what do you do?" Big winners, realizing someone will always ask, are fully prepared for the interrogation. Many folks have one written resume for job seeking. They type it up and then trudge off to the printer to get a nice, neat stack to send to all prospective employers. The resume lists their previous positions, dates of employment, and education. Then at the bottom, they might as well have scribbled, "Well, that's me, take it or leave it." And usually they get left. Why? Because prospective employers do not find enough specific points in the resume that relate directly to what their firm is seeking. Boys and girls in the big leagues, however, have bits and bytes of their entire work experience tucked away in their computers. When applying for a job, they punch up only the appropriate data and print it out so it looks like it just came from the printer. My friend Roberto was out of work last year. He applied for 2 positions, a sales manager of an ice cream company and head of strategic planning for a fast food chain. He did extensive research and found the ice cream company had deep sales difficulties, and the food chain had long-range international aspirations. Did he send the same resume to each? Absolutely not. His resume never deviated 1 iota from the truth of his background. However, for the ice cream company, he highlighted his experience turning a small company around by doubling its sales in 3 years. For the food chain, he underscored his experience working in Europe and his knowledge of foreign markets. Both firms offered Roberto the job. Now he could play them off against each other. He went to each, explaining he'd like to work for them, but another firm was offering a higher salary or more perks. The two firms started bidding against each other for Roberto. He finally chose the food chain at almost double the salary they originally offered him. To make the most of every encounter, personalize your verbal resume with just as much care as you would your written curriculum vitae. Instead of having one answer to the omnipresent, "What do you do?" prepare a dozen or so variations, depending on who's asking. For optimum networking, every time someone asks about your job, give a calculated oral resume in a nutshell. Before you submit your answer, consider what possible interest the asker could have in you and your work. Here's how my life can benefit yours. Top salespeople talk extensively of the benefit statement. They know when talking with a potential client, they should open their conversation with a benefit statement. When my colleague Brian makes cold calls, instead of saying, "Hello, my name is Brian Tracy, I'm a sales trainer," he says, "Hello, my name is Brian Tracy from the Institute for Executive Development. Would you be interested in a proven method that can increase your sales from 20 to 30% over the next 12 months? That is his benefit statement. He highlights the specific benefits of what he has to offer to his prospect. My hairdresser, Gloria, I discovered, gives a terrific benefit statement to everyone she meets. That's probably why she has so many clients. In fact, that's how she got me as a client. When I met Gloria at a convention, she told me she was a hairdresser who specialized in flexible hairstyles for the businesswoman. She casually mentioned she has many clients who choose a conservative hairstyle for work that they can instantly convert to a feminine style for social situations. "Hey, that's me," I said to myself, fingering my stringy little ponytail. I asked for her card, and Gloria became my hairdresser. Then, several months later, I happened to see Gloria at another event. I overheard her chatting with a stylish gray-haired woman at the buffet table. Gloria was saying, "And we specialize in a wonderful array of blue rinses." Now that was news to me. I didn't remember seeing one gray head in her salon. As I was leaving the party, Gloria was out on the lawn talking animatedly with the host's teenage daughters. "Oh yeah," she was saying, "like we specialize in these really cool, up-to-the-minute styles." Good for you, Gloria. Like Gloria the hairdresser, give your response a once-over before answering the inevitable "What do you do?" When someone asks, never give just a one-word answer. That's for forms. If business networking is on your mind, ask yourself, how could my professional experience benefit this person's life? For example, here are some descriptions various people might put on their tax return. Real estate agent, financial planner, martial arts instructor, cosmetic surgeon, hairdresser. Any practitioner of the above profession should reflect on the benefit his or her job has to humankind. Every job has some benefit, or you wouldn't get paid to do it. The advice to these folks is, don't say real estate agents. Say, I help people moving into our area find the right home. Don't say financial planner. Say, I help people plan their financial future. Don't say martial arts instructor. Say, I help people defend themselves by teaching martial arts. Don't say cosmetic surgeon. Say, I reconstruct people's faces after disfiguring accidents. Or if you're talking with a woman of a certain age, as the French so gracefully say, tell her, I help people to look as young as they feel through cosmetic surgery. Don't say hairdresser. Say, I help a woman find the right hairstyle for her particular face. Go, Gloria. Putting the benefit statement in your verbal nutshell resume brings your job to life and makes it memorable. Even if your new acquaintance can't use your services, The next time he or she meets someone moving into the area, wanting to plan their financial future, thinking of self-defense, considering cosmetic surgery, or needing a new hairstyle, who comes to mind? Not the unimaginative people who gave the tax return description of their jobs, but the big winners who painted a picture of helping people with needs. A nutshell resume for your private life. The nutshell resume works in non-business situations too. Since the new acquaintances will always ask you about yourself, prepare a few exciting stock answers. When meeting a potential friend or loved one, make your life sound like you will be a fun person to know. As a young girl, I wrote novels in my mind about my life. Leil, squinting her eyes against the torrential downpour, bravely reached out the window into the icy storm to pull the shutters tight and keep the family safe from the approaching hurricane. Big deal. Mama asked me to close the windows when it started to rain. Still, marching toward the open window, I fancied myself the family's brave savior. You don't need to be quite so melodramatic in your self-image, but at least punch up your life to sound interesting and dedicated. Technique number 25. The nutshell resume. Just as job-seeking top managers roll a different written resume off their printers for each position they're applying for, let a different true story about your professional life roll off your tongue for each listener. Before responding to, "What do you do?" ask yourself, what possible interest could this person have in my answer? Could he refer business to me, buy from me, hire me, marry my sister, become my buddy? Wherever you go, pack a nutshell about your own life to work into your communications bag of tricks. 26. How to sound even smarter than you are. Did you ever hear someone try to say a word that was just too darn big for his tongue? By the smile on the speaker's face and the gleam in his eye as the word limped off his lips, you knew he was really proud of it. To make matters worse, he probably used the word incorrectly, inappropriately, and maybe even mispronounced it. Ouch. The world perceives people with rich vocabularies to be more creative, more intelligent. People with larger vocabularies get hired quicker, promoted faster, and listened to a whole lot more. So big winners use rich, full words, but they never sound inappropriate. The phrases slide gracefully off their tongues to enrich their conversation. The words fit. With the care that they choose their tie or their blouse, big players in life choose words to match their personalities and their points. The startling good news is that the difference between a respected vocabulary and a mundane one is only about 50 words. You don't need much to sound like a big winner. A mere few dozen wonderful words will give everyone the impression that you have an original and creative mind. Acquiring this super vocabulary is easy. You needn't pore over vocabulary books or listen to tapes of pompous pontificators with impossible British accents. You don't need to learn $2 words that your grandmother, if she heard, would wash out of your mouth with soap. All you need to do is think of a few tired, overworked words you use every day. Words like smart, nice, pretty, or good. Then grab a thesaurus or book of synonyms off the shelf. Look up that common word even you are bored hearing yourself utter every day. Examine your long list of alternatives. For example, if you turn to the word smart, you'll find dozens of synonyms. Some words are colorful and rich, like ingenious, resourceful, adroit, shrewd, and many more. Run down the list and say each out loud. Which ones fit your personality? Which ones seem right for you? Try each on like a suit of clothes to see which feel comfortable. Choose a few